All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining this evening's budget information session presented by the Edgemont Community Council, the elementary school PTA, and the junior senior high school PTSA. For those who I haven't had the opportunity to meet yet, I am Dylan Pine, and I am president of the Edgemont Community Council. The Edgemont Community Council is the leading advocacy and civic engagement organization here in our community of Edgemont. We maintain relationships with partners in government at the town, county, state, and federal level. And we also support community building activities, both activities that we—
Yes, Dad, because I'm doing something.
Oh, I'm going to mute you. Both events that we put on ourselves and events that we co-sponsor with other community organizations. We are the sponsor of the Newcomers Club, and we are also the sponsor of the School Board Nominating Committee. If you ever have any questions about anything we do or you want to get involved, you can visit our website, edgemontecc.org, or our email, info@edgemontecc.org. I would like to introduce from the PTA, we have Pale, who will say a few words about the PTA.
Sorry, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
So my name is Pyle. I'm the president for the PTA. If you guys don't know, we do both Greenville and Sealy, and we do a lot of curriculum programming, like in-school authors, all the STEAM programming, anything you can think of. We do after-school clubs. We do activities in the evenings for communities, movie night. So if you're part of the elementary school, please make sure you join, help us volunteer. And I'd just like to say that our next fundraiser coming up is FET, which will be on May 17th. So you can look at the PTA or the PTSA websites. If you guys have any questions, please reach out to us. We have a board full of members who have been in this community for a while, so we're willing to help you with anything.
Great, thank you, Pyle. And next, I'd like to introduce Liz and Laura from the PTSA.
Thanks, Dylan. Liz, are you waving so people can see who you are? Just a brief intro on the PTSA in case people don't know who we are. We are the Edgemont Parent Teacher Student Association for grades 7 through 12. And we are dedicated to enhancing the junior senior high school experience. We have membership dues, contributions, volunteer efforts, and those all go directly to support our students, our teachers, our schools, through grants for school programming and student clubs, as well as staff appreciation. We sponsor clubs like the Model UN, Builders Club Debate, the high school drama and musicals, equipment and technology for music and arts, STEM programs like robotics, Science Olympiad, Math Counts, and field trips, senior events, senior forum, and more. We also organize parent forums and speakers on relevant topics. This year, for example, we had an internet safety forum and a college admissions testing forum earlier in the year. And finally, we serve as a liaison between parents, teachers, and students and represent Edgemont parents about matters that affect EHS students and families. I'll just echo Pyle's plug about the FET. The PTA and PTSA run the Edgemont Spring FET, which has been going on for many, many years. It's in about 2.5 weeks on May 17th. If you haven't bought your tickets yet, please do. It's an important fundraiser, and it's really a lot of fun. The whole community comes together and lets down our hair a little bit. We are delighted to co-host this forum for our community to learn more about the coming year's budget proposal. And with that, I will turn it back to Dylan.
All right, thank you, Laura. And before I pass the virtual mic to Superintendent Hamilton, I just wanted to thank Brian Paul, the Assistant Superintendent for Administration and Business, as well as Dr. Roscoe, the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment, who will be doing the heavy lifting this evening. We will have about 15 minutes of presentation, and then depending on how many questions there are, 20 to 40 minutes of Q&A, and then we will call it an evening. If you can stay muted until we, you can stay muted during the program. Once we get to the Q&A section, we will take questions over the chat, and then our presenters will field those questions. So with that said, I'll pass the mic to Dr. Hamilton.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Audio's okay? Everyone hear me okay? Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I am honored to be with you this evening, along with Assistant Superintendent Brian Paul, who oversees our finances, and he is the Assistant Superintendent for the business and administrative parts of the office and operations, and Felipe Orozco, who is the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment, and our Board President, Jennifer Desmarais, is also joining us this evening. Our goal this evening is to provide an opportunity to just kind of walk you through our budget proposal for the 25-26 school year, and more importantly, to provide an opportunity for you to ask any questions. If you have not had the opportunity to view the last few board meetings that have been devoted to talking about our budget and our budget process, I encourage you to do so. You will find that there is plenty of information made available for you to keep you informed about what you are being asked to vote on later next month. So let's begin by just kind of talking about our budget and our effort to create a fiscal plan that shows the balance between our fiscal responsibilities and our strategic investment in our students, our staff, and our facilities. We remain focused on strengthening the foundation for our future success while respecting the impact on our taxpayers. As you know, we are living in very uncertain fiscal times right now. So we're very proud to be able to present this budget to you that reflects a commitment to our continued pursuit of excellence, and one that is sensitive to some of the unknowns that all school districts are facing right now. Many elements of this budget were informed directly by feedback from our students and our staff, and we are grateful for a community that actively participates in shaping the priorities for our schools. We view this budget not simply as an annual plan, but as a part of a broader long-term vision for advancing academic excellence and keeping an eye on the future, enhancing innovation and understanding our responsibility to support the whole child. So tonight's presentation is only part of an ongoing conversation. We want to encourage you to stay engaged as information becomes more readily available for you as this time goes on. So I want to talk a little bit about our budget development process. So we start with an approach that's called zero-based. And what a zero-based program is not making assumptions that items from the previous year are automatically rolled over into the next year. And that begins with our budget defense rounds, our budget defense process. Principals and department leaders are asked to present their budget and show connections to senior cabinet on how their requests or their budget proposal connects to board goals, how it supports programs and initiatives that are designed specifically to advance our students, and the alignment between our plan for moving forward and educating children from their K through 12 experience. This collaboration is done very intentionally to ensure that principals and department leaders can speak to what they are requesting in their budgets and why they are making these requests. The beauty of a zero-based approach is it provides a pathway to assess whether or not programs are being successful and whether or not we are yielding the kinds of results that match the investment that we are making in our fiscal planning. Now, of course, sometimes there are programs and initiatives that take time in order to actualize those results. So some programs may be designed intentionally to be multi-year initiatives in order to generate support. So not everything is designed to provide an immediate turnaround in terms of its efficacy. But this approach does give us an opportunity to engage in conversations that help us ask questions about why requests are being made and how it directly benefits our students and how it benefits our communities. We've also worked to identify efficiency. So where are there opportunities for us to think very creatively about how we could collaborate with consortiums that increase our buying power, for instance, and what opportunities are there for us to make connections with BOCES, which is the cooperative services that are available to public school systems that kind of oversee and manage some of the services, programs, and materials that school districts may want to implement. And then, of course, there is this delicate balance between compliance, meeting state obligations, but also recognizing that Edgemont exceeds state standards. So compliance is a low threshold for us in most instances because we have established expectations and standards that exceed state standards, but we do need to make sure that we are compliant with the expectations that the state has set forth for us. And that includes graduation requirements, for example, and this year, the obligation to ensure that there is a research-based literacy program in place, specifically the science of reading, that our teachers are being trained and that we are coordinating all of these compliance efforts with this budget process. The beauty of the budget defense round is each senior cabinet member comes with a different lens, specifically focused on their area of expertise. So Brian is looking at it from a dollar and cents point of view. Felipe would be looking at it from a curriculum, instruction, and assessment perspective. Jennifer Del Conte, for example, who is our Director of Pupil Personnel Services, is looking at our budget to make sure that we are meeting the needs of our students who have varied learning needs, those who may have individualized education plans, who are differently abled, or who need some level of accommodation in their educational approach. And then we continue to make certain, of course, that we are supporting our staff members in a way that ensures that they are coming to work happy, healthy, and equipped to perform the job that they need to do. And that's where HR comes into play. Our Director of HR, Dr. Amy Moselli. And then lastly, this balance that we have to create between matching our revenue with our expenditures and making certain that we are budgeting appropriately and anticipating contingencies for things that may come up, just like in your home, for instance. You may need to plan for a roof that is reaching its life expectancy, or your hot water heater. You may know that any moment that hot water heater may give out on you. So you need to begin to think about what that replacement cycle might look like, or how we refresh our technology in the district. So this revenue and expenditure, these revenues and expenditures are done very delicately in order to ensure that we are being as responsible, fiscally responsible as possible. And then, of course, that ultimately leads to some budget revisions. But all of this happens behind the scenes before it even gets to the budget, the finance committee of the board, which then gets to the full board committee for review and consideration and ultimately adoption. Again, this budget looks at curricular coherence and programmatic effectiveness as guiding principles, looking at our goals, and very deliberately and carefully looking at the profile of an Edgemont graduate and our core beliefs to ensure that we are addressing the needs of all of our students, no matter where they are on their continuum of academic success. So that includes students who need additional supports and those students who may require enrichments because they exceeded grade level expectations. So our teachers have to have within their toolkit skills and a degree of expertise that address the varied needs of our students across the continuum. It is data driven. We're looking very carefully at how data is used to support how our students are doing and to support recommendations that are coming from our principals and department leaders. And when that data is not consistent, how do we support that data and provide the necessary training that some of our principals and department leaders may need in order to extrapolate data that helps us understand why some of these requests may be made. Obviously, not everything that is presented tonight is where we started. Some things were presented in the budget that didn't make it to the final budget process. But that's part of this give and take process. And lastly, for our executive summary, it is a comprehensive plan that is designed to sustain and elevate the district's legacy of excellence while ensuring that our students are fully prepared for a very complex and interconnected world. One of the most challenging things we face as educators today is preparing our students for such an uncertain future, understanding that there are jobs and career opportunities that don't even exist today that we have to prepare our students for. So each year, the budget process becomes more and more dynamic and more complex. So relying on the expertise of all of our professionals who have years at creating school budgets and years at educating students to be able to come together and work collaboratively to create this fiscal plan. So while it's called a budget, it really is an educational plan with a financial emphasis on reaching excellence for our students. And keeping in mind our philosophy that college begins in kindergarten. So what do our students need to know and be able to do as early as kindergarten to put them on the pathway to success? And with that said, I'm going to ask Felipe if he would step in now and review some of our highlighted budgetary investments from a curriculum instruction and technological perspective.
Thank you, Dr. Hamilton. Can you hear me? I was dealing some tech issues. Perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to, first of all, thank you for the opportunity and thanks for being here. And just, it's a privilege to share some of these highlights with you. And just to make sure that, just to continue with Dr. Hamilton's initial introduction, this is really a very cohesive collaborative process. And, you know, when we highlight some of the pieces that pertain to particularly curricular instruction, many times, you know, when I present my budget, it's not my budget, but it's really like a collaboration with with all of the administrators in the district. So for instance, if you had the opportunity to see our presentations earlier, this year, you could see all of the footprints of the collaboration in all of the programs, in all of the content areas with Sealy Place, Greenville, and also the high school. So this is really a high level sort of highlight investments in what we believe it's going to continue to really enhance our student experience. And so with that, I'm just going to highlight some of the core school programs that we are proposing for next year, particularly. And we start with the new implementation of the foreign language program, which will start in 5th and 6th grade at both Sealy Place and Greenville. And at this time, we are increasing the amount, and we are proposing this pilot program so that we can continue and go down, continue our program from EHS. Also, in terms of, as Dr. Hamilton mentioned several times now, we are making sure that we are allocating funding for everything that has to do with science of reading, in terms of materials, in terms of preparation, in terms of professional learning and training for our teachers. Some of the highlights for this endeavor include basically collaborating via our vertical teams, and we're also having a committee that's going to be ensuring that, as I mentioned in one of our earlier meetings, that we are meeting the regulation that the state has set forth with this approach, which is a combination of many years of research on what we know works for reading. In addition to that, from our in our PPS department, we are proposing the addition of a new board-certified behavior analyst, which will help with our ICAP programs and all other special education programs. Also, we are proposing the expansion of the boys volleyball program to include modified junior varsity teams, in addition to a new varsity fencing team, which was previously a club. And last but not least, we are also targeting funds for continuing the paving project, which I'm sure we can have more details if you choose to have some this as an area of inquiry in your questions. So again, these are just some of the highlights, and we're happy to discuss if need be. But we do have many presentations throughout our board and our budget season that you can definitely go back and look at full-length presentations on these topics. And with that, I am going to pass our presentation to our Assistant Superintendent for Business, Mr. Brian Paul.
Thank you, Dr. Orozco. Thanks to the ECC, PTA, and PTSA. We really appreciate the opportunity to have a different type of venue to be able to discuss the budget or the proposed budget for next year. And thank you to all of those of you who are here and listening in. The purpose tonight is not to go through every slide that we've discussed at the Board of Education meetings. Of course, those have been recorded. The slide decks are available. And at the end of this slide deck, you'll see some information in terms of where you can get that previously recorded information and previously presented information. But instead, I'll just provide a high-level overview to get the conversation started before we open up for questions and answers. The 25-26 proposed budget comes in at $73,994,549. That's a 2.6% budget-to-budget increase from the current year's school budget. We are proposing a tax levy of $62,059,429 to support the overall operating costs. Obviously, that is only a portion of the revenue getting to the $73 million budget. And we'll discuss the other revenue streams in a few minutes. The tax levy increase year over year is 1.51%, and the anticipated change in your tax rate would be 1.84%. So you'll see at the bottom of the slide, the proposed budget results in an estimated tax rate per $1,000 of assessed value of just over 19.79. So if you were to take your assessed value of your home, divided by 1,000 and multiply by that figure, that would give the estimated tax bill for next year that relates to the school budget alone. Of course, residents in Edgemont pay two taxes. You pay both the school budget and a town tax to the town of Greenburgh. Next few slides depict 10-year trends. So here's the 10-year budget to budget trend. You'll see the 2.6% proposed for next year falls within a range between 2.16, our low back in 2018, and a high of the current year, the 24-25 budget of 3.96%. The 10-year average the 10-year average budget to budget increase is 3.18%. So next year's proposal of 2.6 falls about 0.5% below that. The 10-year tax levy to tax levy trend shows a fairly similar depiction. The solid line you see there is the tax levy change year over year. The dotted line represents the CPI change tracked during the same time period. As in a moment, we'll speak about the effect CPI has on our ability to levy taxes. but it's also a benchmark that we can use to describe some of the changes that we see in annual increases in costs, whether they be goods or services. Next year's tax levy increase of 1.51% is actually the lowest tax levy increase that we've had in 14 years. Over the last 10 years, the tax levy increases have ranged from that aforementioned 1.51% up to 4.33% back in the 2019 fiscal year. The average tax rate increase over that same 10-year period is 2.69%. Over the same period, CPI has increased on average by 2.88%. So we've met one of our goals, which has been to try to control the tax rate increase at a rate that is at or below that of the CPI over the same 10-year period. During our budget presentations at the Board of Education meetings, we discussed several different times the idea of the New York State tax cap and the maximum allowable tax levy, but haven't really put the two together in a slide like this. And so I think to just make sure everybody understands how the state legislation impacts school districts, we'll talk about in principle, the New York State 2% property tax cap first came into play in 2011. The goal is to limit the annual growth of property taxes or the tax levies in school districts and in municipalities to the lesser of 2% or the rate of inflation defined by CPI. In action, that's not the full story. So it's not really a 2% tax cap. What school districts are permitted to do is create a tax levy called the maximum allowable tax levy that is based on that New York State determined formula, but it also includes several other metrics in the calculation. One of which being local growth factors, which describes what is happening to the property value of the district and municipality. It includes allowable exclusions, which are typically things for us in the area of capital expenses, whether they be one-time transfers to the capital fund or existing debt service related to capital projects, like our most recently approved capital bond. There are other less material things that get included as exclusions, like excessive increases to the state-determined teacher retirement system pension system or the employee retirement system pension system. But in most years, these do not impact us. And when they do, they're of very small material value. So the key figures in this year's calculation is that the Edgemont tax-based growth factor determined by the state was 1.0127, representing a 1.27% increase. And so when you take our taxes levied last year, you get to immediately increase it by that 1.27%. The second key figure is CPI still sits above 2%. And so at the time of calculation in March, we take the lesser of the two, which is 2%. And that also impacts the prior year tax levy to help us create a new maximum allowable levy. This produces for us what's called a tax levy limit. Our tax levy limit for this year is about $60.4 million. And then we get to add in what's called the permissible exclusions. Our permissible exclusions this year account for about 2.7 million. Contained within there are our debt service payments. So previous payments are payments for previously approved bonds, as well as the newly approved bond in October and the new debt service that is coming onto our books next year, plus any other local capital expenses or BOCES capital expenses that we are responsible for. That brings us to a maximum allowable tax levy of $63,159,429. What that means is that as a district, we could ask for up to that amount as revenue without requiring the district to trigger what's called a supermajority vote. School districts who use the maximum allowable levy or lower need to secure a majority vote, so more than 50% at budget vote time in order to approve the budget. Those school districts who exceed the maximum allowable levy need to secure 65% yes in order to pass the budget. This year, for the second time since the tax cap was initiated in 2011, we are proposing a tax levy that is lower than the maximum allowable levy. But this is the first year that it is materially lower than what the maximum allowable levy would permit. In fact, for next year, our proposed tax levy is $62,059,000, is $1.1 million lower than the maximum allowable amount. In order to balance the budget, we'll talk later about the purpose or the use of fund balance to help offset the overall costs. So when we talk about the balancing act, on the left-hand side of the slide, you see the way that we tend to categorize our expenditures, and on the right-hand side, the revenues that we anticipate to support that. I've listed them from the highest amount to lowest amount, bottom to top. And so personnel expenses represents the largest share of the overall costs of the district. As you work your way up, obviously we have expenses related to buildings and grounds, out-of-district special education placements, contractual services, debt service related to our capital projects. Wherever possible, we try to recategorize expenses under the heading of BOCES, which is a Board of Cooperative Educational Services, because we receive additional state aid for many of those expenses. We have transportation expenses. And then the rest is generally miscellaneous. It's the equipment and the supplies and the resources, the textbooks, the physical tools that we use to implement an educational program. On the revenue side, the aforementioned property taxes represents the vast majority of our overall revenue streams. That's also supplanted by state aid, investment interest, which has been really positive for the district over the last 3 years, sales tax from Westchester County, tuition from both individuals who are seeking almost a private tuition within the Edgemont schools, as well as tuition received from school districts who are sending special education students to our programs. We rent our property in several different ways to different organizations. And then miscellaneous revenues, which certainly is a catch-all for many different things, including gifts and donations, revenue received from other municipalities, bordering municipalities called border properties, and others. If you were to take all of the planned expenditures developed through the budget development process, and then take the revenues you see in black, we have a shortfall of $1.456 million. It is the proposal of the district to utilize fund balance from our existing reserves and any surpluses generated in the current year to bridge that gap. If the district were to have taken the maximum allowable levy, we would have simply used $1.1 million less of fund balance. Our revenues are in really healthy position currently. And we've spoken many times at Board of Education meetings about the value of those reserves and our ability to utilize those reserves and fund balance over not just this year, but planned use of them over the next several years to lessen the impact on taxpayers. I showed this slide during the budget presentation. One of the requirements of New York State is when we present the budget to the community in our budget book, which will be coming out in the first week in May, last week in April, first week in May. So very shortly for us, is to present it in 3 parts called the Administrative Capital and Program Budgets. This is prescriptive. The state determines how to categorize these expenses. But broadly speaking, the administrative budget is costs related to the general operation and management of the school district, including costs associated with the Board of Education, central administration, legal services, and the supervision of instruction, but not instruction itself. The capital budget is exactly as it sounds. These are the costs related to our facilities and capital improvement projects, as well as the debt service utilized to support that. And then lastly, the largest of these buckets is our program budget, which includes all of the direct instructional costs and services that are rendered to students, including teacher salaries, classroom materials, transportation, athletics, extracurricular, and support services. The breakdown of those 3 is shown on the slide, and you'll see parenthetically the percentage increase across each of those categories year over year. You'll notice the largest decline in capital of 8.4% is primarily due to a reduction in the proposed transfer to capital. Last year, we transferred over $2.4 million to the capital fund to complete several projects. And in the current year, we are proposing a transfer of just $1.1 million. The onset of the presentation, I spoke about, there's plenty of information on the website. I think the best resources to go to find information that's been previously presented, you go to our budget website, which can be found at edgemont.org/departments/business/school budgets, where you'll find voter information, budget calendar, recordings of the previous Board of Education presentations, the slide decks that were utilized during that. There's a budget archive where you can see the budget books from previous years, which is kind of a precursor to what will be coming shortly to the community, as well as the budget notice and the property tax report card. The budget newsletter, should be an extra bullet point there, is coming soon. That's the newsletter that gets mailed home to all the residents of the district and will be posted online. And the budget book, as I spoke about a few moments ago, will contain a line-by-line analysis of all of the budget codes that we have, looking year over year at the percent change and dollar amount changes. And then just lastly, a little plug. So we're here to talk about the school budget. The vote is both for the school budget and school board election. It will be held on May 20th in this Jim San Marco gymnasium at the junior senior high school campus from 6 a.m. until 9 p.m. For those interested in obtaining voter information, including information on absentee ballots, mail-in ballots, military ballots, or otherwise, that information can be found at our voter information link that you see at the bottom of the screen. And you can always reach out to our district clerk, Jennifer Massey, at jmasci@edgemont.org if you have any additional questions as it relates to that. With that, I'll pass it back to Dr. Hamilton if there are any final comments.
Is my mic on? Yes. Just want to reiterate, I apologize, my phone keeps trying to connect to my computer. So if you see my camera going off and on, that's not me hiding. I just want to take this opportunity to thank ECC and our PTA and PTSAs for sponsoring tonight and creating this forum for us to be able to interact with you and entertain any questions that you may have for us. So I will ask Dylan if he would be kind enough to facilitate the Q&A portion of tonight's session.
All right, thank you, Dr. Hamilton. So if there are any questions specifically on the 2025-2026 school district budget and the presentation that we all just heard, if you would please write your questions into the chat. I will read through them. I'll read them out loud, and either Dr. Orozco or Assistant Superintendent Paul or Superintendent Hamilton will answer them. All right, and you can either DM me directly or just put it in the chat, whatever.
I'm writing my question.
All right, thank you. Well, while we're waiting, thank you to both Dr. Orozco and Assistant Superintendent Paul for a really thorough and detailed presentation. All right, Dr. Hamilton, could you please give an example of how data is used to determine if budget items is working or not working?
Yes. So one of the things we look at is obviously student achievement data, which is first and foremost. So our principals are involved in a process which is called managing for results. But effectively, they look at where our students are when they come to us, beginning of the year in particular, and where we have the benefit of having last year's data that provides us with an even better launch pad to compare progress. Middle of the year data, and then ultimately we're approaching now end of the year data. During the budget process, it helps us identify whether or not instructional strategies are yielding results for our students, and where we have made investments in specific programs, whether or not those programs are working. Are teachers benefiting from professional development opportunities that are being provided? And are they implementing district initiatives with fidelity? That may identify greater needs for additional professional development, or may cause us to reassess and reevaluate how our training modules are working. We've made an investment in instructional support teachers in our building. So whether or not these instructional support teachers are in fact helping our most vulnerable students progress across that continuum to academic success. We also look at attendance data and discipline data. Are some of our referrals going down for students who are being identified as having a potential learning disability? Is our social emotional learning platform yielding fewer incidents and student conflict where students are practicing behaviors that result in a degree of resilience or conflict resolution? So there's various data sources that we look at to help determine whether or not the expenditures are yielding the results that we're looking for.
Great, thank you. Our next question, when additional classes are added or taken away, where do the funds come from or go? And I assume that's, if an additional class is added after the budget is set, and I guess if enrollment were to decrease after the budget were set and the class is eliminated.
Okay, Brian, you want to take that?
Yeah, certainly. So think of it in two ways. We try to always ensure that our budget has contingencies built in to support any of the areas where we may need additional staff. Remember, additional staff may not just be classroom teachers and like a one-to-one correspondence of the number of sections offered, but it's also support staff, teacher aides, clerical staff. There are several different areas that we need to look at. Our budget that we build each year has always had contingencies in place. As an example, when we presented this budget, when we presented the staffing a few months ago, we had indicated that there was a full 2.0 teacher contingency in the budget for any additional needed sections. So the idea of if it is used, then it's typically coming from that contingency. If there was a reason why we would need to exceed what was in place, including the contingency, the hope is that we have other contingent funds, or we can find operational efficiencies across other budget lines to help support. On the flip side, so what happens when the staffing determined at budget time is not fully needed? That produces surplus for us. Sometimes that surplus needs to be reallocated for other needs, whether they be capital needs, facility-related needs. I'll give an example. This year, we've seen rapid increase in the cost of electricity due to increased services that came through in February and March this year, the New York Power Authority. There was a need to reallocate funds from other surplus lines to address that shortfall. But in reality, given the personnel represents the largest percentage of our budget, you'll find that over the last few years, we have not realized all of the contingencies that have been in play, and it has truly turned to surplus. That surplus at year end has made its way into different reserves and different areas of our fund balance. So we've built about a $4.2 million reserve for capital needs. We anticipate at the end of this year, we hope to be able to bring that to the full $5 million that was authorized by voters. And we've been able to increase our holdings in our teacher retirement system and employee retirement system reserves over each of the last few years, which will allow us to be able to appropriate those funds in future years. In particular, next year, 26-7, 27-8, when we bring on the full debt service associated with the new capital bond that was approved.
All right, thank you. The questions are coming in now. So next question, roughly how many students are paying for tuition, and then how many is the district paying for out-of-district placements?
Dylan, if you jump to the next one, I'll just find that in my documents and I'll loop back to you.
All right. Do parents have access to metrics that were mentioned? I assume the metrics Dr. Hamilton mentioned, for example, efficacy of social emotional learning programs.
So there are two tools that we are using. One is relatively new, well, actually three. One is relatively new, and that is Panorama. And it is survey data that students are asked to complete during school. The other is Harmony. What's the first part of it? Sanford Harmony, thank you. It is also a survey instrument that helps our students to identify their thoughts and feelings, and then lastly, teacher assessments, teachers' daily anecdotal records and observations. So that data is not readily available for parents. It is typically goes right to teachers and principals are then able to say, yes, we want to continue with Sanford Harmony, or no, we don't. Panorama, like I say, is still new. We are in year two of full implementation, and still have some kinks that we're working out with it, frankly. The high school is a little further along with Panorama than our elementary schools are, because they did have the Sanford Harmony instrument available for them, but that data is internal and not typically available to parents. There may be some way to share it though, Dr. Niall. So because we haven't shared it doesn't mean that it can't be shared. I'll be glad to look into whether or not there is a way to share that data with parents.
Great, thank you.
Dylan, I can jump back in and answer that question. So rough numbers right now for next year, I think we are planning on 13 students via tuition. That's some of which are through a tuition relationship with the individual family, some of which are with other school districts for special education within the district. And we plan to have 17 students out of district where the district is paying for their services elsewhere.
All right, thank you. Next question. What is the best way for community members to express issues, concerns to the Board of Education or the administration, whether on budget items or other district topics?
We are actually putting together a who's who directory, which literally identifies potential issues or concerns and what the appropriate chain of command is. But typically, the process is to start with the classroom teacher, the assistant principal, and then elevated through the central office. If it is curriculum related, once you move beyond the building, you would go to Dr. Orozco if it's curriculum instruction and assessment. If it is personnel related, you would go to Dr. Moselli or to me, the superintendent, depending on what level the staff issue is. If it is budget related, you would go with Brian. And then when all else fails, that's when you go to the Board of Education.
All right, thank you. So the participant suggests that there was a slide mentioned that the administrative budget is growing at twice the rate of the program educational budget for this year. After this presentation, would data be available about the rate of growth of the admin budget over the past 5 years?
Can we take that, Dr. Hamilton?
Yes, please.
Yes, certainly. And I think that this question is fairly synonymous with a comment that was made in public the other day at a board meeting. So certainly we put together some data based on that request that we can certainly share as well. And then when you think about the breakdown of the budget codes, when you get your budget book, which again could be picked up either in any of the district offices or school buildings, but will also be available online. It'll be presented in the 3 components. So it'll be admin and capital and program separately. And it will show a year-over-year analysis. I believe it's 5 years. So you'll see the actual expenditures, the budgets, and the changes you see year over year on each and every one of our thousands of budget lines. So I think that that's actually the best resource for that. But as it relates specifically to personnel in those areas, we can certainly share some after. I'll give just some highlights of that. We did an analysis, an ask was to look at from 2019-20 through the proposed budget in 25-26. And it wasn't sure if we meant just the admin budget or administrative costs. So kind of looked at it under both lenses. I think the summative data would be is over those 6 years, the district has added a net 5.4 additional staff members, non-instructional staff members. So that can be clerical support. It could be teacher coaches, the teachers who are there to actually coach other teachers, or we call them teacher resource specialists. Could be those related to the PPS department, CPSE, CSE chairperson who runs the CSE and 504 chair meetings. We previously spoke about the BCBA, the Board Certified Behavior Analyst. Those are all positions within there. And similarly, across that same time period, we have increased the number of administrators by 1. We've added a Director of Human Resources effective last year, which brings us to 15 full-time administrators in the district. Certainly have a little too cumbersome to throw up on a slide right now, but I can share detailed analysis as well.
Great, thank you. And then our last question, unless there are others out there, please put them in the chat while you can. What, if any, concerns are there about the amount of state funding available versus the amount projected in the budget?
That's a great question, and I'll start out, and then you can just hit your wagon, if you will. That is a very much a moving target, and one that leaves school districts in a quandary pretty much every year. So we get state aid numbers that are projected, and then ultimately they're solidified when the governor releases her budget. So we anticipate that the state funding formula will be fully funded. Sometimes what happens is the state puts forward a funding formula, but then they don't fully fund it. So the public may have a perception that a district will receive X number of dollars, but that is not ultimately what makes it into school budgets. And then those funds are allocated for specific purposes. So we anticipate that this year we will be receiving the amount of aid that is projected, but I have also seen aid be reversed in the course of the school year. So that remains a moving target. I don't have any major concerns about state funding, and because we are not so reliant on federal funding, like many other communities are, that's not a huge issue for us. It is an issue, but the bigger concern about the likelihood of not receiving some of our revenue is probably more from the federal level. Brian?
Yeah, thank you. So I think I'll take the second part of that comment and talk about our strategies and then work towards the state level. So as Dr. Hamilton expressed, there's some concern about federal funding. We receive about a little over $400,000 in the current year in federal funding in the form of what's called 611 and 619 IDEA grants, which are special education grants. We have other grants, title grants, but in terms of total value, they're very small. The vast majority of it is coming in those 611 and 619 grants. In order to protect the district for any reduction in that next year, we have articulated a plan to hold additional funds, approximately $400,000, to balance out any shortfall that we may have by holding it in what's called unreserved or unrestricted fund balance. So that would be above what the 4% typical holding would be for a district. We've done this in the past when there was planned reductions of state aid, particularly just after COVID. We held a dollar amount that was planned to be reduced so that we would be able to balance our budget going forward. We don't budget for the items that are in the grants, and so we have to have a revenue stream if those grants do not come through. And so we would be using fund balance in that case. As it relates to state aid, you may or may not know the state is required to adopt a budget by April 1st. Here we are on April 28th. They do not have an adopted budget. The governor has made her proposal. The proposal includes several different aspects of state aid. The primary one for us that matters is called foundation aid. So in the governor's proposal, she recommended an increase of 2% at a minimum to every district's foundation aid number. For us, that would mean $5,040,231. Concerns are out there in several districts about what is going to happen if the proposal is not held. And when the adopted budget comes out, there is not this 2% increase, or districts are not held harmless, which means they do not receive an amount. To say hold harmless means you receive an amount no lower than what you got the previous year. That's been a long-standing practice, which has helped districts ensure that they are not funded less in a future year than they are in the current year. Although Edgemont, because we have had declining enrollment over several years and have a high wealth ratio as a district, those two metrics in the foundation aid formula may point to a reduction at some point in time. I do not anticipate the adopted budget to show a result lower than what the governor has proposed. And so we are quite hopeful that it will be 2% at a minimum. I know both houses' proposals were greater than 2%. So unless other aspects of the budget conflate the state aid, it seems unlikely that we'll see lesser than 2% increase in the current year.
Great, thank you. And that was the final question. So unless there's any lingering questions out there, we will wrap up at just at an hour.
Thank you
All right.
again for this opportunity. And if you have any additional questions, you can certainly shoot us an email, and we'll be more than glad to get back to you.
All right, and thank you again, Dr. Hamilton, Assistant Superintendent Paul, and Assistant Superintendent Orozco, and also thank you to the PTA and the PTSA for joining the ECC in this budget information session. So thank you for being active community members and educating yourself on this year's budget, and be sure to turn out and vote on May 20th. Thank you, and have a great rest of the evening.
You too.
Thank you all.
Thank you.